and remind those in the public gallery. A very hot ticket, obviously. Just remind everybody, including committee members, to switch off your mobile phone, as the meeting is held in open session and recorded, and mobiles may interfere with the recording system. And remind members of your obligation to declare any relevant financial or other interest in relation to today's business. Apologies from Chris Hazard, and I know Sean Rogers is due to be here, but apparently he's going to be late. Do you have any other apologies?
I believe Ross will be along late.
Okay. Just as most, because the members of the public gallery welcome you to the Education Committee. Just to remind you, if you can switch off your mobile phone, because it's probably outside anyway, but presumably heralds potential arrival later on then for us.
Yes.
Okay. Just so because the mobile phones interfere with any of the recording procedures. Okay, I'll move on to Chairman's business. And welcome someone very familiar face. For those of us who've dealt with the Speaker's office down the years, a very familiar face, Paul Stitt, as our new assistant clerk. Welcome aboard the Titanic. In terms of then, I have a number of items just of Chairperson's business. Obviously, since we last met, the examination results are out, and I think there were a lot of very encouraging statistics that came out of those, both in terms of the overall results and also drilling down into things like the increasing popularity of maths, more girls taking STEM subjects, for instance, on it. But I think in particular, and I think we're often a little bit blasé about this, but I think it's important that we do publicly record our congratulations to the pupils, the teachers, the schools and the parents for their recent examination results. I presume everybody's content with that.
Agreed.
Also pass on our congratulations. I know Chris Hazard isn't with us today, but one of the members of the committee, Chris Hazard, became a father on the 26th of August 2015, so pass on our congratulations as well. You're sort of alluding, Robin, do you want to? And so Paul became? Are you second?
Second, yes.
Second, yes.
On the 15th.
Before we go any further, any other committee members, any, I suppose, confessions? Congratulations to offer in that regard.
No.
None that they're willing to put on the public record, at least.
In the dreams.
Also, next item, I just want to inform you of the clerk and myself met yesterday with the permanent secretary of the Department of Education, along with, and I think this has previously been done with chairs as well, of the DE staff to discuss. I suppose, to be honest, it was a get-to-know-you session, but also then I was actually slightly taken aback. There was about 16 or 17 different officials. One wondered who was actually running the department during the meeting, but that's by the by, and I thought that was very useful. We've also received a number of reports which have been laid in the Business Office, just to notify members. We have the Department of Education resource account for 2014-15, the Teachers Superannuation Scheme statement for 2015, the CCEA 2014-15 annual report, the annual report from CNAG, the Irish language sector body, 2014-15, NICE's 2014-15 Directors Report and Financial Statements, Ofqual 2012 to 2014 Report on the Regulation of Vocational Qualifications in Northern Ireland, and the committee, those are all within the Business Office. The committee has also received copies of the Education and Training Inspectorate Disposal of Records Schedule and the GTCNI Record Retention and Disposal Scheme, and presumably if any members have particular interest in those, contact the clerk. We believe that for most of those items, there are hard copies available if you wish to contact committee staff, and we're due later on in September. Mention to be made of the resource account, for instance, that the department is due to brief on the PFG and its business plan, and CCEA will brief on levels of progression due to in October. Right, in relation to a few other items on the reports, and I'd seek sort of the agreement of the committee. Department of Education seeking further information in school and non-school redundancies. The CCEA comments in its annual report about the impact of possible in-year budget cuts. GCTCNI governance issues, the high-level criteria to which new GCSE and A-level specifications are to comply, the primary counselling options paper, the digital technology strategy, the ALB oversight guidance and progress in respect of the departmental medium-term efficiency plans identified in the Stormont House Agreement. Are members content to write in respect of those reports? Presumably, what are we requesting copies of them?
Well, we have the report. This is actually to inform the briefing. So the department's going to come up and talk about PFG and business plan, and it's basically to give them a heads up that members may want information on the following.
Okay, members are content. The Education Authority, right to the Education Authority seeking information on the summer camps project and the governance of SEN spending in the Belfast Education Board area. Members agreed on that. Okay. Right to CCEA advising that in addition to levels of progression and the use of analytics and system performance measurement, computer-based assessment and the review of GCSE and A-level specifications. It also briefs in October on staffing issues, independent board effectiveness review and informal commission complaints reference in its annual report. Members are agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Also, the CCA seeking clarification as to the impact on vocational qualifications of the replacement of the qualifications and credit framework as to whether Northern Ireland is to participate in the new GCSE national reference test, if we can try and find that out of CCEA. Members are agreed. Sina G asking in respect of the, quote, widespread and very significant failings in the system and processes for governance. I presume that's, is that referencing Deloitte, is it? Or is that the annual report?
Yes, Chair.
That's within Sina G references annual report to set out the associated action plan and clarifying the funding position. Again, our members agreed that we seek clarification on that. There's an issue then also with seek clarification from NICE. They made reference in their annual director's report to realigning, quote, its strategic direction to DE's priorities, and also in respect of the restructuring the club bank debt, which has led to, quote, the amounts outstanding of £9,558,053 being waived, if we seek information just off them on that. Members agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. And DE in respect of the ETI disposal of record schedule, seeking clarity as to whether the disposal after 6 months of school inspection evidence, including the notes associated with school inspection moderation, is in line with previous recommendations from the Information Commissioner that information records should be retained for longer periods. Are members agreed?
Just clarify that one, Chair.
On the ETI disposal?
Education and Training Inspectorate are destroying records of inspections?
Moderation meetings, they retain, I think, the overall inspection records for a longer period. But then there's a little paragraph about the notes associated with school inspection moderation being destroyed after, I think it's 6 months. So,
I just remember the discussion we had, I think it was in Newcastle, about destruction of records generally in the education sector, and some of them are kept for 60 years, not 6 months. Does that not seem like indecent haste?
Well, I suppose that's where we can seek, purpose of really writing to them to seek clarification as to what the position is on that. I suppose depending upon what response we get from them, so we can see then what other action needs to be taken as a result of that.
Yeah, well, okay.
I mean, I think if it's disposal of evidence, then it's presumably of a limited nature, but I suppose the other thing we've got to be careful of, if there's any, where they stand, for instance, if there was some form of legal challenge at some stage,
Well, that's
the evidence has been destroyed.
You did say, you used the emotive term disposal of evidence.
Yeah, I think that's the way that school information evidence is what I think they've referred to us as in that regard. So to be fair, I don't think we're trying to be pejorative in that regard. I think we're using the terminology that they've used in our direction on it. We'll not be accusing them of anything until we have the evidence. Okay, that's all the chair's business. Welcome, Ross. I know you're appointed just before the summer, but I think it's the first meeting Welcome to the committee. We're just in at point 3 on the agenda, which is the draft minutes of the 1st of July. That's at page 6 of your papers. I'll just seek members' agreement that the minutes are a complete and accurate record. I don't presume anybody has any. Of course, I'm assuming you've all read it from cover to cover in that regard.
Agreed.
I suspect you were in Florida sunning yourself at this stage, weren't you, Trevor?
I haven't read it.
All right, okay. Members are though agreed in relation to that. Okay, so I'll then sign the minutes. Okay, we have a number of matters arising, not surprisingly, given the passage of time. First, 4.1 is the elective home education. Now, we had a situation where I think at that point, during the briefing session, we actually lost the quorum, but we carried on, and members of the committee felt it might be beneficial to get an oral briefing on the subject from Home Education NI. I think it was quite. I think whenever we got I think it was the Education Authority that briefed us. It was quite an interesting, probably less in terms of perhaps what they said and what they said they didn't know in that regard and some of their approach. But I think it would be useful, I think, if we had a briefing from Home Education NI to get the full picture in that regard. Members agreed with that? Okay. Committee stage then of the Special Education Needs and Disability Bill now. There's a number of items of correspondence relating to the SEND Bill, which included pages 17 to 107. Those include a response from Autism NI, the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, Children's Disability Strategic Alliance, NASUWT, commenting on further suggested amendments to the SEND Bill. We've also, from the Department, received a revised Keeling schedule. If you remember, whenever Daniel Greenberg, I think, had suggested that, we've got that. Response from DHSS Minister in respect to the SEND Bill and proposal to place further statutory obligations on health and social care trusts. The Health Department has also commented on the Early Years Transformation Programme. 2 responses from DE providing further detail on aspects of the SEND Bill. And there's also in your tabled items, there's a response from the Children's Commissioner from Nicky, just to seek the committee's agreement to note these responses. Obviously, it's an issue, I think, over the forthcoming period will be examined in much greater detail in that regard. But if we note these responses and so that we can publish them on the web page and share them with the department as appropriate if members are agreed with that. Okay. The department has also produced an amended version of the clause-by-clause table for the SEND Bill. The clerk previously advised by email it's now available on the Sky Drive Pro. The clerk will produce a final iteration of the table for next week's meeting, including all evidence, and members agree that we note the department's revisions on that. Again, the other thing I'll just note as well, whenever we were with the department yesterday, we've raised the issue of the regulations, and we've had some little bit of discussion with that, and we've stressed to them again the importance of the committee receiving those. I think those are, I suppose, in the final stages of being drafted, and I think the hope that they will have some of this, but it may be there's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, so they may at least be able to share them, but perhaps not in a public fashion in that regard. But I think the sooner they can get the regulations, the better within that. But obviously that's a subject we'll be coming back to, probably an area of substance in the weeks to come. Okay, we'll move on then at item 5, page 112, which is a written briefing on the issue of school uniform. Now, members, in September of each year, there's extensive reference to in the press to the costs associated with school uniform, which seems at times to be escalating. I remind members that the committee had previously exchanged correspondence with the department on the subject of school uniform in respect of costs and apparent retailer monopolies. The committee previously recommended the department that it amends its guidance in order to specify a maximum cost for school uniform. And there's relevant correspondence, updated Assembly research paper are there for the members' information. in relation to the subject, then, does anybody have any comments at all? Not Trevor.
Yeah, this one crops up every year, as you rightly say, through the media, but we have had the previous correspondence with the department. The maximum price limitation sort of notion, I doubt if that's enforceable, really. It would have to be a recommended maximum, and many of our, frankly, our what's classed as better schools will probably ignore it, because they seem to think that parents have unlimited funds. I know there's some assistance available here from the department for if you satisfy free school meals criteria and things like that, but the people who actually suffer just as badly in this are the ones who don't qualify for any assistance, but who send their kids to a school where they seem to think it's okay to spend 45% on a sweatshirt for PE, and something that could be bought in Matalan for £3 or £4. So I mean that's where the problem is, and I'm not sure what we could do, but I have parents every year, and this year again, complaining. I mean, a school blazer for one of our schools, which I won't mention, £75. This is for a 12-year-old, you know, and no opportunity to shop around or for suppliers to compete or anything like that. It's a quite unnecessary scandal, and I think we're way behind the rest of the UK and Ireland and probably the rest of the world in this. That we still seem to think that it's absolutely essential to uphold the standards of clothing, uniforms, and I understand the reason for a uniform, but I really do query, and I've said it many a time, why it has to be to such a high level. I mean, £300 plus overall wouldn't be an unreasonable estimate. Some of these schools.
Strikes me there's a couple of things. I mean, I think we could inquire from the department what further actions they can take or even advice that they can give, because it strikes me, you're right, Trevor, in terms of part of the problem, you have quite naturally a level of autonomy for the schools that effectively can set their own boundaries. But I suppose to what extent is at least a clear message going out that schools should be actually trying to keep costs to a minimum, looking at I think there is a useful purpose that is served by uniforms, because I think the problem is that if you don't have uniforms, you get into you're going to get a situation where pupils and parents are getting into like a closed arms race otherwise in that regard, which actually end up being considerably more expensive than the uniforms. But to what extent, I suppose, the issue is that is there at least guidance and indeed encouragement to schools to try and keep costs down by ensuring as much as possible as of a, as you say, a relatively generic nature.
Sorry, I was just going to conclude it, Chair. The problem is that children grow. That the school blazer only really does 1 year. It's not like your IBAN, something that we can keep for 5 years. And and some of the stuff that's being demanded of parents to purchase is actually branded goods. And like you go into a shop looking for a pair of Nike trainers and you pay £70. You go into Sports Direct and you get the same thing in Azuri for 15, and so it goes on.
I mean, I think what I'm saying is I think we need maybe explore at least from the department as to what extent it can at least push things in terms of at least saying to the schools you should be looking at less branded material, more generic. I'll bring in Ross was next, I think.
I think in support of Trevor here, my own family, when I was a child, my mother was a widow with 6 of us, and having to attempt to buy uniforms for different schools was impossible. If you attempted to buy a plain dark blue blazer, which was the school blazer, it wasn't counted because it had to be the blazer with the badge, and the blazer with the badge was a certain price, and there's no doubt generic would be far better if we could get a blazer and then they can buy the badge or whatever. I think it is a fact that the branding is a major issue, and of course young people will quite easily either bully or intimidate or in some way shame somebody who can't afford to buy a blazer of the same quality as somebody else, and that is a major issue. So I do agree that uniform is something that yes, I agree there's a need for uniform. No need to go down the line of specific brands, etc., so that we can get some sort of fair play for everybody.
I think it's important maybe to get an update from the department on that issue, what is being done and what they can do other than simply give, and to be fair to the department, I suspect that their powers are very limited. It's disappeared. But at the very least, we need to ensure that they are encouraging people down this route. The other issue, just I'll cover all members to bring in. Certainly, I would welcome, and I think it's good. I heard the publicity around whenever the clothing allowance scheme, which you're right. At least, I mean, it doesn't cover everybody in that regard. It's limited in its nature, but I think at least it's a useful contribution. Yeah. I think there were figures clearly in terms of the situation in 2014. I think it was. It was about 90,000. I think they've taken up the scheme on it. I appreciate it. I think it's the scheme is used through the Education Authority. To what extent, I think it may also be useful to inquire what the level of take-up has been this year. And it may be, to be fair, in terms of numbers and others like that. Robin and then Jonathan.
Chair, I mean, if you remember I don't think you were there, Chair, at the time when we went to Methody. It was Michelle, I think, was the Chair. Methodist College indicated that they were stretching out to become involved in the local primary schools and responsibility to them. And indeed that they had established a fund for those less well-off parents whose children were able to get to Methody. I suppose that's an indicator that they have recognised that school uniform could be a problem for some children in going into some of the, as Trevor described them earlier, the better schools. Having said that, Chair, I think it would serve a purpose if the committee felt that it would be appropriate that we at least express our concerns about it, maybe through some media channel. And if that could be done, I think, Chair, you're absolutely right. The school is independent. It will serve its own purposes. But I think expressing a concern of the committee through yourself might at least be a useful step.
I happy on behalf of the committee if Peter, do you want to draft something in the press release? Yeah, yes, on that side of things, like that. Jonathan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to back that up, Chair, you know, I went through this experience. You know, I had a daughter change schools last year, and then you're in the new uniform, and trust me, I was not at all impressed when I seen the overall cost of buying.
Jonathan, you're a difficult man to
uniform.
impress at the best of times.
No, it was a rather large bill, and it struck me that's okay, we could afford it, but there's plenty out there who can't afford it. And the other thing that strikes me, once you move away from the generic, as you say, on some sort of sewed-on badge or something like that, you get into this remit, and I have noticed several schools doing this, where the specification is so tight that really there's only one place you can actually go and purchase that uniform, and that destroys the idea of competition out there, where there's some hope of buying it slightly cheaper somewhere else. So when you're doing your comments to the department, I know they have very little control over this because it really is down to the Board of Governors in schools, but they could at least issue some form of guidance to the Board of Governors, because I'm not convinced they're all aware of the consequences of setting so tight a specification that you cut out competition and you then force the price of that uniform through the roof.
And I think, to be fair, we're not, I mean, while we want to see the department do the maximum it can, I don't think anybody's being critical of the department. It is actually, it's the key message actually is to be got out there to schools themselves as to what they're doing. I know also, I think during the summer there was a report that had come out with a bit of analysis of this, indicating the extent to which, and in many ways it's a tremendous tribute to the devotion of parents, but the number of parents who, particularly from sort of either medium or less affluent backgrounds, who are prepared to go into debt, who are prepared to do a whole load of things, simply they can directly provide the school uniform, and indeed simply beyond the school uniform, all of the other additional school activities for their school children. But that shouldn't have to be the case in that regard. Okay. Sandra?
Okay, thanks, Chair. Of course, some of us buy the uniform so big that the children look like they're drowning in their uniform in less than 2 years. So far, so good. That's happened. That's worked for me. But just about I know the department has the guidance, and it is important. It is only guidance, and I mean I've been involved in cases where the department has provided that guidance as such, but the schools aren't listening. So I think it is important, as has been said, to provide that guidance, but also provide the reasoning for that guidance as persuasion to the schools. And it was an interesting research paper, and I noticed that, you know, there were statistics there about the availability of uniforms. And some of the statistics there, they talked about stats for available from less than 3 suppliers. I would actually like to know if it's available from 1 supplier, because there's competition if you have 2 or more,
Yes.
not necessarily 3. And in some,
I think, by the way, we should have a little sort of a charity box for every time a phone goes off that.
Should be suspended.
Sorry? Yeah. The cost of
Would
school
anybody
uniforms.
notice, Trevor?
The cost of school uniforms appear into insignificance for Jonathan in a short while. But
I suppose sometimes where there's a
100
skill,
lines.
there might only be 2 retailers in that town that could supply uniforms. So 3 or more is maybe not relevant for that particular town. So it would be interesting to have this.
yeah, and I think this comes down to the extent to which the level of branding that is there, because if you have on at least a range of the things, either something that's generic or something at least that requires a very limited amount of branding, it probably then makes it a lot more available, if you like, for other retailers to be able to stock in that regard. It's clearly if you're in for instance, a neighbouring town, it's not going to pay you to have for X school type of thing on that side of things. So, yeah. We can find that out as well in relation to that. So members content then with those sort of action as much as we can that we can take in connection with that.
Thank you.
Right, move on then to item 6, which is the draft end of session report, covering the period 1st of September 2014 to 31st of August 2015. First of all, does anybody have any comments on the content of the draft report?
Well written.
Very nice. Very comprehensive. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're not even doing it could do better. Right. I also advise members that the revised version of the report, including the final costs, will be tabled, as well as just as a slight degree of work in progress, later in September. So are you content to note with that, I suppose, one slight degree of addition to things on it, to note the draft end of session report?
Just on the list of changes to the personnel, it actually says that with effect from the 23rd of June, Mr Ross Hussey replaced Mrs Sandra Overend, but they're both still here.
Yes. Sort of a, it was a technical,
Can we get
because obviously
rid of
Sandra had filled
Actually,
Danny's spot, then I suppose technically speaking left a vacancy of her own spot. I suppose it's maybe because it involved the vice chairman's position, it's sort of a sleight of hand in terms of the way that these committee changes happen in that regard. Just technically at the position.
Good try.
It's good to see, Trevor, it's a fine sign of observance that you're able to spot that both of them are here in that regard. And also, it's clear indication that somebody's read the report. Okay.
No,
And you were able to
That's the
spot the
first
difference.
page.
Yeah, spot the difference indeed. Okay. We'll move on then to correspondence, and obviously, because we've had the summer recess, there's a... Okay, I suppose this is on the tablet, because there's probably a whole Brazilian forest has come down in terms of correspondence. We have got in the main pack from pages 148 to 436. There are 33 items of correspondence, plus additionally 2 tabled items. So I'm only going to pick out a few of the items, but and ask for members to raise any other items as we go along. Item 7.1 is an index, really, just of the correspondence. So I'll deal with a few items here, but again, if anybody else wants to pick out anything as we go along. 7.3, the Department of Education, the Pathway Fund, at page 156. There's a response from Department of Education regarding the Early Years Pathway Fund. The Department indicates that the Early Years Fund, in its current closed format, will end on the 31st of March 2016, and that will be replaced by the Pathway Fund. Department also indicate that departmental officials are currently developing a Pathway Fund. The Department also advised that funding has been found to continue the Early Years Fund until this time. If members remember, there was quite a few groups who were left in difficulties because of the cut. It was something that the committee has indicated that we want to see prioritised, and to be fair, that was then prioritised and the money put in place. But I suppose one of the criticisms at times has been that the fund has been closed to those organisations that had been received funding. So clearly the department intends to bring forward a Pathways Fund, and obviously as soon as that information becomes available, I think it'd be important we get some level of briefing whenever that comes. Right. Yep, Sandra.
Can I just come in at 7.4?
Yep, go on ahead.
I was just interested to read that response, and I just wondered really if it was possible to get information from the department as to how much was saved by the department by not providing the summer school by the Regional Training and Development Unit as they did before.
Yes, I know it's been raised. It's been an issue, been certainly raised as well in terms of that.
Yeah.
In terms of the professional development side of it, that there were concerns over that this wasn't so. Yes, I think it'd be useful to find out that
Yeah.
information.
They talked about how much they were committing in future years or about in other ways, but they didn't talk about how much they saved. So, thanks.
Okay. Okay. Right. I'll confirm just in terms of, I think it's an invitation at 7.10. I'll check it out and confirm in relation to that. 7.12, just want to mention, it says, suggests that the committee writes again, that's obviously in terms of the action plans, just that we seek sight of the relevant action plans on those. Anybody want to raise a hand between 7.5 and 7.12? Okay. Just Jonathan?
All right, 7.9, sure, the oversight. I noticed you were well and truly fobbed off there, Peter, with regard to the answer to that one. Have we wrote to the Education Authority on that one, because they are the ones with the oversight responsibility?
I think, Chair, as members will recall, this was kicked off by a concerned individual, I think, writing to us, and the committee then wrote to the Education Authority about oversight, and we did get a reply, and we also wrote to the department. So that's everything that we've got. And I think in my covering note, yes, little clarity has been provided.
Which amounts to nothing. I can't see how that can be the situation. The Education Authority will have those details. I think the simple truth is they don't want to hand them over. Because I can tell you now, I know of nobody in the southeastern region who was ever, any sort of authority was used on them. Can we push that one with the Education Authority, because they're the ones who will have the detail and the answers to that. They just don't want to give you the answer.
Right again to the Education Authority.
Well, can we demand it? Sure. What?
Well, certainly writing in.
If you know someone's holding information and they're not handing it to you, what can you do about it? Because they do have the information.
Information that the members after is the number of times that oversight has been applied. Okay, I'll ask again and indicate that the committee does not accept the answer that it's received. And if they
want a timescale, put it in the last 5 years, because I think the numbers are going to be so small that we'll all be sitting here and going, right, we now know why governors do whatever they want, because they're untouchable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. 7.13, the Stranmillis, Queen's and St Mary's, on the CSE guidance, that's at page 213. We've got responses from Stranmillis University College, Queen's University Belfast, St Mary's University Belfast, Department of Education to the committee, queries regarding initial teacher education and the curriculum in respect of the provision of child sexual exploitation guidance for teachers. The department references the NSPCC Preventative Education Programme. Suggest perhaps that we write to the department seeking confirmation that all primary school children have access to the Preventative Education Programme. Members are agreed on that. Okay. Important subject. Next item I intend to raise is 7.15. Again, I'll check. Should be available for that on the RTU. Okay. Business in the community at 7.16. There's a request from Business in the Community to the Deputy Chairperson requesting to brief the committee on a range of issues. Are members happy to receive an informal briefing from Business in the Community? Would I say anything just on that, or?
Well, I would support that. That move, obviously, Business Community. It's a good organisation, and it's useful for all members to engage with them and begin to help in regards to education. It's always, we talk about joined up government and but it's joining up government with the business as well, so it's important.
Okay. So,
Good, sorry.
okay. Right. Apart from just the suggested actions from 7.17 through to 7.25, I don't have anything particularly to raise directly there. If anybody, Trevor?
Well, just to see my name on this 7.17 one about collective worship. I don't have a particular view about this now, but this person was in touch with me and I just told him to write into the committee.
Okay.
It might be of interest to find out if the department actually has any guidelines or advice on the subject.
We can
It's
find that
good.
out. That's sort of for a start. No problem. Anybody else want to raise anything up until start of 7.26? Okay. Right, 7.26, the Department of Education Chair Board of Governors Area Planning at 398, page 398. The formal response from the Department of Education to the committee's position paper. Obviously, remember we had the debate in the chamber. There's also correspondence. I'll maybe deal separately with the issue of the special school area planning draft report. But I suppose first of all on the first item, can we get agreement to upload the department's response to the web page and ask the public, as the Public Accounts Committee is to receive an oral briefing from the department on mainstream area planning in November. Okay. On the issue of the special school area planning from DE, I think it would be useful. We've obviously had correspondence and contact from a couple of schools in relation to this. It seems obviously the position is that there's a draft report which has then been, I think, sent out to the principals of a number of the special schools for their comment. I think it's right that they kind of feel like first bite at that. And I appreciate it's then going back to the Minister, but I think it'd be useful if we could get an oral briefing of an update on that. If members are agreed on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, just to be clear, because the Public Accounts Committee has now listed area planning, as we learned yesterday, to my surprise, that they were expecting to brief the department's going to brief the department in November. Well, that means the committee has to go hands off. The Education Committee has to go hands off. But could still talk about special schools.
Well, that's what I was suggesting, actually, very specifically on the special school side of it, because there is, I think it'd be fair comment to say, and I appreciate what is there in terms of draft may not be what the final document is, but there is, I think, some concerns amongst a number of the special schools on the specific document and the specific recommendations that are there. So I think it'd be useful if we had representation in relation to that. There's one item, I'm going to deal with this reasonably delicately, but I can give the name of the school to the clerk. Was approached along with one of the other members by one of the schools who was concerned whenever the draft came to them, it specifically named the school itself as being informal intervention, and in the report gave the name of the school. Now, they have no problem indicating that, you know, the report deals with a number of special schools, one of which is informal intervention, but they felt it was, they were very concerned over the fact that they were directly named in the report. And I would suggest, I appreciate, because there's wider issues in terms of the content of the report, which clearly will need to be decided by the Minister and examined by ourselves. But I think it would be helpful, I think, if the committee was to write to the department saying that even with any draft form, or indeed certainly any formal final form, that the direct reference to the name of the school is taken out, because obviously that will undermine potentially confidence in the school itself. And I think it's a little bit unfair in that regard on it. Members agreed with that and give the details to the clerk. I don't particularly want to name the school directly in public in that regard. Members are content with that. Okay, a couple of other 7.27, 7.28, just intend to note if there is anything in relation to that. 7.29 is an event which seems to have been slightly overtaken by events. I think there was invitations to chairs of the committee to meet with the United Nations CRC task force. We're not going to invade Syria or anything, but they wanted at one stage to meet with us. However, we've then subsequently, that was established, I think, for, wasn't it Friday? It was Friday. And I know a number of the committees, it wasn't just the Education Committee, a number of the committee chairs were invited to that. That meeting subsequently has been cancelled, apparently on the grounds that they don't want to meet with government officials I'm not quite sure how the committee chairs count as government officials, but nevertheless, as the meetings council, there's not a great deal we can do about that, but that was to bring that to members' attention. Right, 7.30, the school inspection descriptors. And this corresponds at page 419 from the department advising that of some of the changes to school inspection descriptors. The changes are not in line with those recommended by the committee's recent inquiry report, and the department has also sent an invitation to an ETI stakeholder event for schools. Again, I mean, do the committee want to get a further briefing from department and Eddie on the changes? Members, not be enough for that? Okay. Right, 7.31, there's an invitation to keep Northern Ireland Beautiful event in the Eco schools, and again, checks with the diary, but it should be okay for that. Then 7.32, there's an event a number of us met in the last session with representatives of the Youth Parliament. Arising out of that, there was a suggestion, I think, Ross McVitie, who's a member of the Youth Parliament committee members. There's an event taking place on the 10th of September 2015. I know that, I believe he's probably emailed directly members, or maybe sent to members, but certainly sent into the committee. I think I'd indicate I'm happy enough to, I think he was looking somebody from the committee to speak at that briefly, so I'm happy to speak at that. You're looking for a little bit perplexed.
No, it's just the time was different than I thought. It's 2 p.m. Brilliant.
2 p.m. Okay. Just obviously draw the members' attention. I don't know whether at this stage, if maybe members want to indicate if they're available. I see a couple of. Was I?
Yeah.
They're supposed to be going.
Yep. Okay. Right. Invitation from the Construction Employers Federation to attend the Construction Excellence Award on the 8th of October. I think I'm possibly double booked that day. I don't know whether the Vice Chair, you'd be free for that at all, or do you want to check?
We'll check.
Okay. Right. Then 7.34, there's departmental new guidance, which is corresponds from the department enclosing new guidance for schools on relationships and sexuality and drugs education. That completes, I think, the items in the main pack. On the table pack, there's from Educational Psychology Services, there's correspondence from the Education Authority regarding its plans to amend Educational Psychology Service provision. And I suppose members, just that's to flag that up, may be useful whenever it takes place later on today. In addition, I thought we'd sort of just more or less go into that, but in terms of the correspondence, as per the cover sheet, members are happy to deal with the suggested thing. Jonathan? Sorry,
but before you move on much further, Peter, I just want to ask the clerk, with regard to 7.34, if you do recall, I raised an issue of has either the department or the Education Authority got actual procedures around how to deal with teaching staff who may be abusing drugs, whether legal or otherwise? And I don't, maybe it's my bad memory, but I can't recall a definitive answer coming back on that one. I could be wrong. Is this a response to that, or does this just apply to how schools deal with pupils around these issues?
Pupils, but we can write to the department seeking clarity on the question the member asked, Chair. I think so.
It was way back early on in
No, it's okay.
in terms of the correspondence. It was 7.6 about, when schools are overspending excessive school budget surpluses,
Yes.
and the same in SPEN. It tells us about the guidance and so on, and it's quite bland. I would like to know what is the department doing to a school that has excessive budget year on year in this particular financial crisis, and to the other side, schools that are in serious financial debt year on year. What is the department doing to with that? Is it just guidance?
I think it'd be useful, Sean, on that. I think it'd be very useful as well. It's been raised maybe within a slightly different context in that regard. But I suppose the other issue, to what extent, as you say, what specifically are they doing, but also maybe useful to just absolutely clarify what powers are there.
Yeah.
Because again, it strikes me that the position is that different schools maybe find themselves in very similar positions, are reacting differently, and perhaps some of it is the perception of what the particular power is there or isn't there. And you may get a situation where some Thunderbirds are being very responsible and taking particular courses of action, and others aren't. But maybe sometimes that's because they feel that they're being compelled to do particular things that they don't want to. So I think it'd be useful to get that clarification. Would be helpful on that point. Is where we stand. Jonathan, is that that point?
Just as a point of information, I think that ties in completely with the other issue we're looking at on how many Board of Governors have actually had disciplinary action taken on them. I think you'll find a very clear correlation between the lack of intervention and the simple truth is nothing's done about those schools with massive surpluses or those in massive deficit. There tends to be this theory out there was amongst education boards that they all balance out, therefore brush it under the carpet and forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of issues there as well, because there's also, I think, where you're getting year on year massive surpluses or massive debts that aren't being tackled. It's an issue. It would also slightly concern me at times that at times you almost have, again, feeling a certain level of pressure, almost an artificial figure of here's what you should be as your level. And you sometimes get with schools that have a bit of a surplus that almost feel a compulsion, we're coming up to the bit, we need to spend this, and it may be that it's not particularly wise spend, but it's because then it helps them hit a particular point in that regard. And I suppose there's that side to it as well. But I think it'd be useful if we can get that information back from the department as to A, what they're doing about it, and B, I suppose clarification around what powers they've got and whether it's simply guidance. I think will be helpful in that regard. Okay. Does anybody else have anything else they want to raise under the correspondence before we move on? Okay. We're ticking along, I think, very neatly in terms of the time I think we're supposed to be. Right, move on then to item 8, which is the Forward Work Programme, which is at Forward Work Programme at 438. We're scheduled to have the debate on the Shared and Integrated Education Inquiry Report. I think it's been scheduled by the Business Committee for Tuesday on the 8th. Also remind members that further written submissions from stakeholders in relation to the SEND Bill secondary legislation have been considered and will be added to the clause-by-clause table. Now, also in terms of that, the Department, as we alluded to this earlier on, the Department has offered to brief the Committee on the draft secondary legislation associated with the SEND Bill. I think the offer is that it's on the basis of a closed session in that regard. And I think it's better that we get that information out. My own view is it better that we get that information and get it quickly in that regard, because I think given the nature of the SEND Bill, it's actually vital that we have the fullest level of information before we do that. So, are members content under the circumstances to take that in closed session?
Yeah.
Obviously, the preference would be an open session, but I think if at least we can get the thing early, and that obviously then would have implications that that the session wouldn't be published as part of the associated draft secondary legislation as part of its report in that regard. Yes, Robin.
Chair, can I just ask the question of Peter? Has the legislation formally been sent at this stage from the department to any sort of consultative exercise with the special educational needs schools?
We're talking about the secondary legislation. Yeah. My understanding from the department is no. So they've just drafted it, and the reason they're giving that they want it to be in closed session is that because they haven't consulted with anybody else yet, so they want to give the committee assurance, because the committee has some concerns about the regulations that would flow from the bill. So by way of assurance, that's what they were going to do, brief in closed session. But it's only draft legislation, so members would have to make a judgment about how assured they feel.
I think the issue in relation to that is, I suppose, it's given the fact that we're trying to operate this a bit on parallel tracks in that regard. I suppose the idea was that we wanted to get this as soon as possible, and I suppose if they were to take this in a situation, it was to go out to draft consultation before they could say anything on it or indeed present it to us. Then you're pushing it so much further down the line. But clearly, if you like, we would either then have to essentially put things on hold as regards, you then get a bit of a chicken and egg situation as regards to legislation. I think it's important that we try and ensure that mean, there's important legislation that we need to get through on this, but we also need to ensure that it's got right. This seems to be possibly the best way of squaring the circle on that side of it. Okay. Right. In relation then, just another.
Yep, done that. Done that answer.
Okay. Right. Okay. There'll be a closed session, I think. Sorry. On the 9th of September, which will be our next meeting, the Clerk and Bill Office will provide procedural advice, and the Assembly Research will provide a recap on the evidence received so far in terms of the Send Bill. And it's usual that that is in a private session, which allows members the opportunity to ask questions, seek clarification. So members happy to begin the deliberation of the committee stage on the 9th of September as planned?
Yeah.
Okay.
So sorry, Chair, just to labour the point, what members will be faced with then next week is a big table showing all of the suggested amendments, and what the committee will do informally is say, yes, that amendment's a great idea, let's do it, or no, that's a terrible idea, we'll not do it. So there's quite a few of them, so you would need to be familiar with the table. And as I say, quite a lot of the session will be enclosed, so if members want to ask probing questions or questions they may wrongly think are stupid, that is fine. That is what the closed session is for. Ask away. Chairperson.
I'm glad you qualified that by saying that they wrongly may think it's stupid.
No, no question's stupid.
Right.
On that regard on it.
Okay. Right. Members agreed with the forward work programme. We're happy to endorse that. Okay. Move on then to the next item, item 9, which is any other business. I don't have any other business. Does anybody else have anything they wish to raise at this stage? Okay, the next formal meeting of the committee will be at 10 o'clock next Wednesday in the Senate chamber. Now, I'd remind members, just before we adjourn, that we will then shortly be beginning the informal session on those looking ahead to the 2015-16 period, but I'll put formally the question that the committee do adjourn.
Agreed.
Okay, agreed.
Senate Programme signed.